I didn't think the moment would stick in my brain the way it did. But it's been replaying like a loop ever since. The kind of scene you don't just remember. You feel. Every time I close my eyes, I hear his voice again. That smug laugh cutting through the clatter of plates at the restaurant. And then those words, "So tell me, how does it feel to be a loser?" I'm going to tell you everything that led up to that moment. Not because I want pity, not because I want to sound like some office hero. I just want this story to exist somewhere outside of my own head. Maybe you've worked under someone like him. Maybe you've been in that chair trying to smile while your boss uses you as a punchline over appetizers. Or maybe you just like a good corporate revenge story. If that's the case, you're in the right place. And if you stick with me until the end, you'll see exactly how one small, quiet move turned that whole insult into the start of his downfall. So yeah, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know how far stories like this travel. That lunch was supposed to be team building. That's what the calendar invite said. Quarterly culture lunch. Sponsored by leadership. I had no illusions about what that meant. For Gavin, our manager, culture was just another word for performance theater. He didn't care about building anything. He cared about being seen as the smartest, sharpest guy in the room, and he loved having an audience. The week leading up to it was already tense. Performance reviews were around the corner, and everyone in our department knew Gavin played dirty. He tweaked numbers. He rewrote JIRA tickets to make himself look like the savior. He cut people off mid-presentation and rephrased their points as his own. Everyone knew it, but nobody wanted to stick their neck out. He'd been with the company for years, long enough to build connections that looked untouchable. That morning, I woke up with the usual pit in my stomach. I checked my email before coffee, mistake number 1. HR had sent a reminder. Managers, please remember to record Q2 culture sessions in official minutes for review. My eyes lingered on it. I didn't know yet how important that line would be. At lunch, Gavin had us all corralled around a long table. Directors from 2 other teams joined. Plates of sliders, wings, and salad bowls got passed around, while everyone tried to laugh at Gavin's endless stream of jokes. His favorites were the kind that looked harmless on the surface but left bruises underneath. "Hey, don't let Mark design the deck, unless you want a colorblind Picasso," he snorted. People laughed. Mark forced a chuckle. "Don't ask Jenna to keep track of time. She still doesn't know how long 5 minutes is." More laughter. Jenna's face went stiff. And then halfway through his beer, his eyes landed on me. "Ah, and here's my favorite." He leaned back, grinning like he'd rehearsed it. "Tell me, how does it feel to be a loser?" The table went dead quiet for a second. You could hear forks clink against plates. Someone gave that awkward half-laugh people use when they don't know if it's safe to stay silent. I smiled. Calm, steady. The kind of smile you practice when you're not going to give someone the satisfaction of seeing you flinch. And then I asked one question. Just one. "Do you want that on the record for the culture session, Gavin?" His grin flickered, just for half a second. He tried to recover with a fake laugh, but I'd already tapped my phone under the table. A Slack huddle was open, broadcasting to the Q2 Culture channel Gavin himself had scheduled. The little bot icon in the corner meant the minutes were being logged. HR, directors, and half the leadership list were technically present. Nobody at the table noticed, yet, but it was enough. That was the moment everything shifted. I didn't eat much that lunch. My appetite was gone, replaced with a strange calm buzzing in my chest. I watched Gavin keep performing, cracking jokes, ordering another round, trying to keep the spotlight fixed on him. But I wasn't really listening anymore. I was counting seconds, watching faces, noticing which directors avoided eye contact, which ones stole quick glances at me, at him, then back at their plates. I knew then that the insult wasn't going to vanish into the noise of another toxic lunch. It was documented. It was witnessed. It was part of the official record. And in a company obsessed with compliance and culture optics, That was like slipping a live wire into the middle of his carefully constructed image. I walked back to the office afterward with my hands in my pockets, steadying my breath. Gavin clapped me on the back as we left the restaurant, still chuckling like nothing happened. "Don't take it so hard, champ," he said, like he hadn't just humiliated me in front of half the leadership team. I smiled again, the same way as before. But inside, I already knew the game had changed. Because if Gavin wanted to play this like theater, fine. I was about to show him what happens when the audience finally sees behind the curtain. If you've ever worked under someone who thrives on appearances, you know the pattern. Every success is theirs. Every failure is yours. Gavin was a master at that. He could spin anything. A client's cautious, "Let's circle back," turned into, "They love our direction." A project running weeks late became, "We decided to prioritize quality." He lived for that slippery in-between where truth could be bent just enough to sound like leadership. But here's the thing about people like him. They get sloppy. And I had learned, slowly, painfully, to stop hoping the company would protect me and start protecting myself. Months before that lunch, I'd begun keeping my own ledger, not a secret file full of stolen data. That's the first mistake people make when they think about corporate revenge. No, mine was clean. I called it my client sentiment ledger. It was nothing more than a folder of public emails, meeting summaries, and direct quotes from calls that were already logged in our system. I copied nothing sensitive. I invented nothing. I just paid attention. When a client thanked me by name for catching an error in their budget, I noted the date. When they asked me to run the retrospective because they trusted my clarity, I flagged it. When Gavin swooped in afterward and tried to reframe the praise, "we" instead of "you," I let it slide in the moment, but recorded the discrepancy. Little by little the file grew. 30 pages, then 40. Each one a breadcrumb. Not dramatic, not damning on its own, but when you stack them up, they painted a picture Gavin couldn't control. At the same time, I noticed his edits. He had a habit of going into Jira late at night, reassigning tasks retroactively. A ticket I'd closed would suddenly list him as the verifier. A deliverable I'd drafted became updated by Gavin after he changed one bullet point. Did I confront him? No. That's what he wanted, an outburst he could spin into unprofessional behavior. Instead, I took screenshots, timestamps, access logs, always through the official tools. Meanwhile, the company had just rolled out a new Respectful Workplace initiative. Gavin loved to brag about it in meetings, as if he'd personally invented corporate civility. What he didn't realize was that the policy spelled out, in excruciating detail, what counted as hostile conduct, what needed to be documented, and how it should be escalated. I printed a copy. I highlighted sections. Not because I planned to wave it around, but because I wanted to know the rules better than he did. He thought policies were window dressing. I knew they were landmines, silent until you stepped on the wrong square. There's a certain numbness that comes with long-term gaslighting. You start doubting your own memory. Was I really the one who fixed that bug? Did the client actually say my name? Maybe I am overreacting. That's why I force myself to be systematic. Dates, times, names. Not for revenge, at least not at first. For survival. And slowly, something shifted. I started noticing how other people looked at Gavin. The fake laughs, the stiff shoulders, the way conversations died when he entered the room. He thought he was the star of the show, but more and more, the audience was just waiting for the curtain to fall. The more receipts I collected, the calmer I felt. It wasn't about winning anymore. It was about knowing that if the hammer ever came down, I'd have something stronger than bravado. Then came the detail that tied everything together. Gavin had scheduled the quarterly culture lunch himself. On the invite, under purpose, he'd written, "Part of ongoing Q2 culture session series." That meant it wasn't just a casual lunch. It was officially classified as a workplace session. And the HR reminder that morning had said clearly, Culture sessions must be recorded in official minutes. So when he decided to humiliate me at that table, he wasn't just being cruel. He was breaking the very rule he'd attached his name to. And because of that, when I tapped my phone and let the Slack huddle log every word, it wasn't some sneaky trick. It was compliance. It was exactly what the company had asked us to do. I walked out of that lunch with more than just bruised pride. I walked out with leverage. Not because I'd set a trap, but because Gavin had walked straight into one he built himself. And while he laughed and clapped me on the back like nothing happened, I knew the game board had shifted. He thought he was untouchable. He had no idea I'd been quietly stacking receipts for months, each one waiting for the moment he'd finally go too far. That lunch was it. And now it was only a matter of time. There's a moment in every performance where the mask slips. With Gavin, it happened in slow motion, right there at the restaurant table. When he called me a loser, the laugh that followed was too sharp, too eager. For the first time that day, not everyone laughed with him. Some looked down at their plates, others shifted in their seats. It was the smallest crack in his armor, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. The detail that mattered most? That lunch wasn't just a social outing. It was filed in our calendar system as Q2 Culture Session. The words Gavin himself typed, which meant it wasn't a casual Friday beer run. It was a corporate event, governed by compliance rules, logged by HR, and technically part of the company's review process. So when he leaned back in his chair, beer in hand, grinning like a late-night talk show host, and dropped that insult, it wasn't just cruelty. It was misconduct in an official session. And I had the receipts. I glanced around the table, pretending to reach for my water glass. I noticed who froze, who chuckled nervously, who tried to pretend they hadn't heard. Directly across from me was Clara, a director from accounts. She blinked twice, then busied herself with her fork. To Gavin's left sat David, a senior PM, who let out a laugh but quickly covered it with a cough. And next to me, one of the 8 coordinators, invited for culture oversight, shifted in her seat like she wanted to disappear. They were all witnesses, whether they wanted to be or not. And the beauty of it was that the Slack huddle was quietly running in the background, the minute spot capturing every word. Even if someone later claimed they didn't remember, the system didn't forget. The chat channel was tagged, the timestamp recorded, the participants listed. The rest of the lunch dragged on like bad theater. Gavin doubled down as if he hadn't noticed the shift in the air. He told another round of jokes, each one sharper than the last, like he needed to reassert control. Don't let Jenna near the budget spreadsheet, unless you want to explain why 2 + 2 = chair. Mark, you should have been a magician. Things disappear every time you touch them. People forced laughs, but the energy was gone. The more he tried to command the room, the more hollow it felt. I sat there, smiling politely, eating almost nothing. Inside, I was taking mental snapshots. The HR rep's clenched jaw, Clara's eyes darting to the exit, the way even Gavin's closest ally checked his phone instead of engaging. This wasn't just a slip of the tongue anymore. It was a pattern, unfolding in real time, under the banner of a company-sponsored event. The final straw came when he raised his glass for a toast. "To the team," he said loudly, his voice carrying across the table. "Even our slow learners." His eyes flicked toward me. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. I just kept that same small smile. And once again, I said nothing. I didn't need to, because the record was already writing itself. When the plates were cleared and the checks paid, Gavin stood up like a conquering hero. He clapped me on the back as we left the restaurant, still laughing. "Don't be so sensitive," he said. "It's all in good fun." But I could feel the weight of the silence behind us, the kind of silence that lingers when people are too uncomfortable to speak. As we walked back to the office, I opened the Slack channel on my phone. The transcript was there, neat and unedited. Gavin's words preserved in digital ink, wrapped in the very compliance process he thought he controlled. That night, I sat at my desk and pulled up the official respectful workplace policy. I read the clauses again, slowly this time. Harassment may include, but is not limited to, verbal comments intended to demean or humiliate employees during official sessions. All culture-related sessions must be recorded and submitted for review by HR. 2 lines, that's all it took. Gavin had written his own trap. He'd built the box, labeled it culture session, and then climbed inside. All I had to do was close the lid. And the best part? I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't lashed out. I hadn't even broken eye contact. I'd simply asked one question. Do you want that on the record? Turns out, he already had. I slept better that night than I had in months. Not because the battle was over, but because for the first time I knew the rules weren't just his to twist. They were mine to use. The week after that lunch, the office felt different. Subtle but real. People didn't laugh as loudly at Gavin's jokes. The HR coordinator avoided his desk. Clara, the director from accounts, kept glancing my way during meetings like she was silently asking, "Are you okay?" Something had shifted in the current, and Gavin, of all people, didn't notice. He doubled down instead. That's what narcissists do when they sense control slipping. They squeeze harder. First came the deadlines. We had a client launch scheduled, a big one of those accounts that could make or break quarterly numbers. I'd been leading the prep for weeks, testing deliverables, running retros, keeping the client looped in. Gavin swooped in 3 days before the rollout and reassigned me. "Too much on your plate," he said, smirking in that way that made my skin crawl. "Let me take the reins." Translation: he wanted the credit, but clients aren't stupid. When he joined the prep call, fumbling through details I'd documented in painful precision, one of the directors interrupted. "Actually," she said, her voice sharp, "we'd prefer if my name leads the retrospective. They've been our main point of contact." The silence that followed was glorious. Gavin laughed it off, but the red creeping up his neck told me everything. Next, he tried to cut me out of access. Literally. I logged into Jira one morning to find that half my tickets had been reassigned. Tasks I'd opened, closed, documented, all under his name now. His edits weren't subtle, updated by Gavin where I'd done the work. Here's the problem for him. Jira logs everything. Timestamps, IP addresses, edits. You can delete your fingerprints from a PDF, but you can't erase an audit trail from a system built for accountability. So I screenshotted every single one. Dates, times, changes. I wasn't angry anymore. I was meticulous. And then came the numbers. Our company had a performance bonus program for managers. The math was simple. Bonuses were tied to client satisfaction scores. High NPS or CSAT scores meant bigger payouts. What Gavin had been doing quietly was assigning himself as owning manager on projects he barely touched. He'd piggyback off the goodwill earned by the team and then cash the check. For months, nobody noticed. Why would they? He had tenure, a reputation, the right friends. But my client sentiment ledger, the file I'd been keeping since long before the lunch, told a different story. Side by side, the emails showed clients naming me, praising my work, while the official system listed Gavin as the owner. It was subtle theft. Not money stolen from me directly, but recognition rerouted into his pocket. And then one day, the CFO's office pinged me. "Please preserve all communications related to Client X," the note said. "Do not delete or copy files. Compliance will be in touch." My pulse spiked. I hadn't triggered this. Someone else had. Maybe the HR coordinator, maybe Clara, maybe a quiet audit flag. I didn't know. I didn't ask. But the moment that message landed in my inbox, I realized the spotlight wasn't just on Gavin's behavior anymore. It was on his numbers. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at the Slack transcript of the lunch. Gavin's insult was right there, sandwiched between jokes about other employees. One line in black and white, tied directly to a culture session policy violation. And now I had a second thread. compliance looking into his bonus metrics, 2 pressure points, both tied to policies he thought he owned, both slipping out of his control. The funny thing, I hadn't done anything extraordinary. No secret hacking, no dramatic whistleblowing, just documentation, just patience. But in corporate life, that's the sharpest knife you can carry. The escalation wasn't just numbers and systems, though. It was human. People started approaching me quietly, in the break room, by the elevators. Hey, what he said at lunch, that wasn't right. I've got screenshots too, if you ever need them. Careful with him, but if anything comes up, I'll back you. The whispers grew louder than Gavin's jokes. For the first time, I wasn't isolated. I wasn't the only one keeping track. By the end of the week, I had 3 parallel lines running. 1, clients asking directly for me, not Gavin, me. 2, compliance quietly pulling threads on his bonus math. 3, HR sitting on a culture session transcript that showed him mocking an employee in public. Gavin still strutted through the halls, still cracked jokes like nothing had changed, but his audience wasn't laughing the same way anymore. And when people stop laughing at the joke, they start watching the clown. Revenge stories usually hinge on some dramatic twist. Stolen files, anonymous leaks, a late-night confrontation. That's not how this happened. My path forward came from a single phone call I didn't expect. It was a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray day where the office lights hum louder than usual. My phone buzzed. Private number. Normally I'd ignore it, but something made me pick up. "Hey," a familiar voice said. "It's been a while." It was Sarah, a former colleague who'd left our company months earlier for a competitor. We hadn't spoken since her farewell drinks. "I don't know what's going on over there," she continued, "but we'd love to have you. I've already floated your name. Leadership's interested, and before you ask, we're not asking you to bring anything, just you. That's it." For a moment I sat frozen at my desk, staring at the spreadsheets Gavin had updated. Not a trap, not bait, just a clean offer. A way out. I didn't say yes right away. I thanked her, asked for details, then hung up and stared at the wall for 10 minutes. My heart was pounding, not from excitement, but from the realization I had leverage now. Not because I wanted to jump ship immediately, but because every corporate policy I'd studied told me one thing: transparency protects you. So I did the one thing Gavin would never have done. I told HR. I booked a short meeting with the HR coordinator, the same one who'd been at the lunch, the one who looked like she wanted to crawl under the table. "Listen," I said carefully, "I've received an external offer. I'm not taking any action yet, but I want to be transparent." Her eyebrows shot up. "You're disclosing this?" "Yes," I said, "because I want you to know this has nothing to do with clients or data. This is just me, as an individual considering options." I watched her shoulders drop in relief. She typed a note into her laptop. "That's appreciated," she said softly. And in that moment, I realized what Gavin had never understood. The system didn't punish honesty. It punished arrogance. That night, I opened my client's sentiment ledger. I didn't send it anywhere. I didn't attach it to an email. I just reviewed it. Dozens of notes, emails, quotes. Every line carefully sourced. Nothing stolen, nothing fabricated. Then I opened the respectful workplace policy again. Highlighted in yellow were the 2 clauses Gavin had violated. My notes matched them perfectly. And finally, I drafted a workplace concern submission. The form was buried 3 clicks deep on the intranet. I filled it out like an accountant balancing books. Date of incident, participants present, direct quotes, links to supporting evidence, Slack transcript, culture session minutes, HR attendance. No emotion, no storytelling, just facts. When I hit submit, I didn't feel adrenaline. I felt calm. The next morning, I got an email from compliance. "Thank you for your submission. Please preserve all related communications. Do not delete or copy files. We may reach out for follow-up." Short, clinical, but it told me everything. The machine was awake. Meanwhile, Sarah texted again. "No pressure," she wrote, "but leadership asked me to let you know they're serious. Full autonomy, salary bump, and no non-compete nonsense whenever you're ready." It was surreal. Two doors opening at once. On one side, my current company was finally pulling the thread of Gavin's behavior. On the other, a competitor was holding out a lifeline, asking nothing but that I walk through the door. For the first time in months, I felt like I wasn't cornered. The irony? Gavin still thought he was winning. That Friday, he strutted into our team stand-up with a grin plastered on his face. He cracked jokes, cut people off mid-sentence, and ended the meeting with his favorite line. "Remember, perception is reality." I almost laughed out loud, because he was right, but not in the way he thought. Perception was reality. And the reality now was that his own words, his own edits, his own arrogance had built a paper trail thicker than any story I could have told, and all I had done was preserve it. That weekend, I didn't think about JIRA tickets or client calls. I thought about the look on the HR coordinator's face when I'd told her about the external offer. Relief, gratitude. She knew what was coming, and so did I. Quarterly review day is usually chaos. Everyone scrambles to polish slides, inflate metrics, make sure their value looks undeniable on paper. Gavin thrived in that environment. He was the guy who strutted into the room like he already owned the applause. But this time, something was different. The air was thick. People avoided his eyes. HR sat 2 rows back with laptops open, notepads ready. Compliance staff dotted the side wall, faces I'd rarely seen in these sessions. Even the CFO had shown up in person. Gavin didn't notice, or maybe he did, and he thought his usual swagger would bulldoze through it. He launched into his presentation like a showman. Slide after slide, he rattled off numbers, claiming ownership of projects, spinning every hiccup into strategic adjustments. He flashed his trademark grin, paused for laughs, gestured like he was commanding a TED Talk stage, and then the CFO raised a hand. "Hold on, Gavin," she said. "Let's go back 2 slides." The room froze. Gavin clicked back, still smiling. "These retention figures," she continued, "they don't match finance's logs, so can you walk us through your source data?" His grin faltered, just a fraction. "Well, sometimes finance and operations aren't perfectly aligned." "No," the CFO interrupted. "We're aligned. These numbers are off." Silence. That was strike 1. Strike 2 came from compliance. "Also," one of them said carefully, "we've reviewed project ownership records. It looks like you reassigned several deliverables after completion. Can you clarify why?" I swear you could hear a pin drop. Gavin stammered something about team alignment and shared responsibility, but the timestamps told a different story. The audit trail was clear. And then strike 3. HR pulled up the Slack transcript on the projector, in black and white. During the Q2 culture lunch, the HR coordinator said, her voice steady but sharp, "You referred to an employee as, quote, a loser in an official culture session." The words glowed on the screen like a spotlight. Gavin's voice echoed in my head again, mocking, smug, certain he was untouchable. But now it wasn't just in my head. It was in the record, on display, witnessed. The silence in the room was suffocating. People shifted in their chairs, eyes wide, glancing between Gavin and the HR team. He tried to laugh it off. "Come on, it was a joke?" "Company policy," the HR rep cut in, "explicitly defines this as harassment, especially in an official session." Gavin's grin collapsed. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked small. He sputtered excuses, reached for charm, tried to flip the narrative. "We've always had a culture of banter. People need to toughen up. Don't tell me we're losing our sense of humor." But the room wasn't buying it, not this time. The directors stared at their papers. The CFO's jaw tightened. Compliance whispered to each other, pens scratching furiously. He was drowning, and no one was throwing him a rope. By the end of the session, it wasn't official yet, But the verdict was written on everyone's faces. Gavin wasn't walking away clean. And the best part? I hadn't said a word. I didn't need to. His downfall wasn't my story to tell. It was his own story, playing out in front of the people he'd spent years trying to impress. Every inflated number, every stolen credit, every cruel joke, it all folded back on him at once. Karma doesn't always arrive with thunder. Sometimes it walks in quietly in the form of policies, receipts, and silence. That day, it sat Gavin down under a spotlight and stripped the grin right off his face. When the meeting adjourned, people filed out slowly, whispering. Gavin tried to act like nothing had happened, but his steps were stiff, his eyes darting. I gathered my notes calmly, tucked them into my folder, and walked out without looking back. Because the truth was undeniable now, and he knew it. When the quarterly review ended, I didn't celebrate. There was no fist pump moment, no cinematic victory music playing in the background. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when a storm finally breaks, and you realize the ground beneath you is still standing. But the silence didn't mean nothing was happening. Behind the scenes, gears were grinding. By Monday, whispers had become official. Gavin had been asked to step aside pending review. It wasn't public yet, not in the press release sense, but everyone knew. His office door stayed closed. The constant grating laugh that used to echo through the halls was gone. And in that absence, people moved differently. Lighter, freer, as if a weight had lifted. That's when I had to make my move. Sarah's offer was still on the table. The competitor wanted me. Not for gossip, not for stolen files, not for revenge. Just me, my work, my record. Clean. Simple. I sat down with HR again. Not the coordinator this time, but a senior partner. I want to be transparent, I said, my voice steady. I've been approached by another firm. They've made a formal offer. I haven't accepted yet, but I need to be honest about my options. She leaned back, studying me. For a long moment she didn't speak. Then she nodded. Thank you for disclosing, she said. It means more than you know. And then the twist I hadn't expected. We'd like you to stay. The CFO is prepared to offer a retention package, not just for you, but for the teammates directly impacted by Gavin's mismanagement. My chest tightened, not from fear, from something else. Validation. For months, Gavin had treated us like disposable props in his one-man show. Now, the company was putting actual numbers on the table to keep us, not him. That night, I laid it all out on my kitchen table. 1. The competitor's offer, higher salary, more autonomy, no non-compete strings. 2. My company's counter, retention package, recognition, stability for the team. 3. The ledger I'd kept, pages of receipts that told the story of how we got here. For the first time, the choice was mine. I called Sarah. I'm grateful, I said, but I need to think about what's right for me and for my team. She didn't push. Whatever you choose, just know the door's open. No expiration date. It wasn't pressure. It was freedom. Back at work, I watched as the team slowly recalibrated. Without Gavin hovering, people started laughing again. Meetings ran smoother. Ideas flowed. And when clients called, they asked for me. Not because I stole credit, but because I'd been the one doing the work all along. I didn't gloat. I didn't grandstand. My revenge wasn't loud. It was quiet, steady, undeniable. The dignity came in the terms. I signed with the competitor, not because my company's offer wasn't tempting, but because I knew I wanted a clean slate. I wanted to step into a room without Gavin's shadow lingering, without whispers of, remember when? But before I left, I negotiated one condition: retention bonuses for the teammates Gavin had tried to cut down. They deserved recognition too. And for once, the company agreed. Walking out with that deal signed felt better than any victory speech ever could. My last week was surreal. Gavin's name was whispered only in past tense. People stopped by my desk, not with pity, but with respect. Some even said thank you. Not for taking him down, but for showing that you didn't need to scream steal or sabotage to survive. Just patience, receipts, and the willingness to let someone else's arrogance write their own ending. When I packed the last box from my desk, I paused for one long moment. I looked around the office where I'd spent too many nights doubting myself, wondering if I was crazy, if maybe Gavin really was right. He wasn't, and I was walking out, not as a loser, not as a victim, but as someone who finally chose their own terms. You'd think the end of Gavin's reign would be loud, some kind of public shaming, a dramatic escort out of the building, cardboard boxes carried past a silent crowd. That's the kind of ending Hollywood loves, but in real life, it was quieter. A company-wide email went out late Friday afternoon. We thank Gavin for his years of service. He has decided to pursue new opportunities. No fanfare, no farewell party, just a sterile sentence dropped into inboxes right before the weekend, designed to disappear into the noise of unread messages. And yet, everyone understood. You could see it in the way people read the line, smirked, then got back to work with lighter shoulders. By Monday, it was as if Gavin had never existed. His nameplate vanished from the door, his calendar invites dissolved. The laughter in the office sounded different, real this time, not forced. I didn't mention his name again. I didn't need to. Because the truth was written in the policies, the audit trails, the transcripts. He had undone himself. All I did was keep the record straight. My last day before moving to the competitor came faster than I expected. I cleaned out my desk, said quiet goodbyes, and signed the paperwork that gave my teammates their retention bonuses. Watching their relief, their gratitude, that was the closest I came to gloating. Not because I wanted to rub salt in Gavin's wounds, but because the people he'd tried to humiliate were finally recognized. The team he thought was disposable was being invested in. That was the win. On my way out, I passed the conference room where it had all started. The Q2 culture lunch turned compliance trap. The chairs were empty, the table wiped clean, but I could still hear his voice in my head, mocking, smug. How does it feel to be a loser? This time, I smiled for real, because the answer was simple. It feels like winning without ever lowering yourself to his level. Itema. I walked out of that building with my box under my arm and no regrets. The competitor was waiting for me. Clients were asking for me by name, and my old team was finally free from his shadow. No gloating, no fireworks, just quiet satisfaction. Sometimes revenge isn't about grand gestures. It's not about shouting, "I told you so." It's about patience, receipts, and the knowledge that karma doesn't need your help. It just needs time. And when it lands exactly where it should. So yeah, that's how it feels. And if you're still here listening to the end, do me a favor. Drop a like, hit subscribe, and tell me where you're tuning in from. Because stories like this travel farther than we realize. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there needs to hear it right now.